The A's announced its 20-man non-roster invitees to spring training. I think a spring training preview show is in order today on Locked On A's.
You are Locked On A's, your daily podcast on the Athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Booney. Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen of the day. I'm from the Bay Area, and I've been a diehard A's fan since 1981. I'm here to bring you a real fans take, covering everything from Oakland to Sacramento to Las Vegas. This is the place for A's fans to get the latest game breakdowns, team news, and more. This is where the passion of the fans take center stage. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. And please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button wherever you are following the show. The A's announced its 20-man non-roster invitees to spring training. We are breaking down by position from your outfielders, infielders, and pitching what spring training looks like this year. That's a bit later. What is going to be the biggest battles or the biggest competition in camp this year? We're going to break that down in a bit. With the 40-man roster set and the 20-man non-invitees being announced yesterday, can any of those non-invitees make it on the 40-man roster? Possibly the 26-man roster, and what needs to happen in order for that to take place? Up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Before we jump into the current 40-man roster, we first must understand how major league rosters work. So you have two types of invitees going to spring training. You have your 40-man roster invites. The 40-man roster must be set by 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on November 19th in advance of the December 11th Rule 5 draft. This is also called the non-tender deadline because it's when teams must decide whether to offer contracts to players on its 40-man roster. If a team decided not to tender a contract, that player immediately becomes a free agent. So, the A's have set their 40-man roster, and we will get to that in just a second. Your second type of invite to spring training is your 20-man non-roster invitee, which is a player not on the team's 40-man roster who's invited to attend Major League spring training. The most important thing for a player receiving this invitation is they can compete for a roster spot. Clubs can extend non-roster invitations to their upper-level minor leaguers and may include invites to minor league contracts given to free agents over the offseason. Now, this is very important. How do you get removed from a 40-man roster? There's only 4 ways. Via trade, DFA or designated for assignment, a flat-out release, or being put on the 60-day IL. In other words, it is very difficult for a player who is part of the 20-man non-invitee to get on the 40-man roster. In order to make the 26-man roster, you first have to be on the 40-man roster. In other words, you cannot just jump from a non-invitee to the 26-man roster unless someone from the 40-man roster is either traded, designated for assignment, released, or placed on the 60-day IL. Anyone on the 40-man roster competes for a spot on your 26-man roster, which is the max number of players a Major League Baseball team can have on a roster until September, when the rosters extend to 28 players, or if you have a double header on a day, you can extend by one player, but I'm not going to get into all that right now. Let's just stick to the 26-man roster and try to keep it as simple as possible. Max number of pitchers on a 26-man roster is 13. Let's break down the A's 40-man roster. The A's currently have on their 40-man roster, they have 17 position players. Shea Langoliers, Tyler Soderstrom, Zach Geloff, Jacob Wilson, Gio Urshela, Miguel Andujar, JJ Bleday, Lawrence Butler, Brett Rooker, Max Schumann, Seth Brown, Estuary Ruiz, Kyle McCann, CJ Alexander, Brett Harris, Daryl Hernandez, Denzel Clarke. They have 23 pitchers. Luis Severino, Jeffrey Springs, JP Sears, Osvaldo Bideau, Joey Estes, Mason Miller, Jose Leclerc, Michelle Otanez, TJ McFarland, Hogan Harris, Mitch Spence, Noah Murdoch, Tyler Ferguson, Ryan Cusick, JT Ginn, Gunnar Hoglund, Grant Holman, Luis Medina, Ken Waldachuk, Jacob Lopez, Justin Sterner, and Brady Bossa. What we do know is that Luis Medina and Ken Waldachuk will be going on the 60-day IL. Now, this will open up 2 spots on the 40-man roster. We also know that it will decrease the pitchers to 21 and the position players to 17. Let's take a look at the 20 non-invitees that the A's have going to spring training. Now, as it stands now, out of these 20 players, only 2 can go on the 40-man roster unless something else does happen. But as it stands now, with Medina and Waldachuk going on the 60-day IL, only 2 of these guys will be able to make the 40-man roster. Pitchers: Jason Alexander, Mason Barnett, Ben Bowden, Tanner Dotson, Matt Crook, C.D. Pelham, Jack Perkins, Domingo Robles, Pedro Santos, Chen Song Zhuang, and your position players: catcher Willie McCleaver, Daniel Susak; infielders Logan Davidson, Nick Kurtz, Alejo Lopez, Max Muncy; outfielders Drew Evans, Henry Bolte, Carlos Cortez, and Colby Thomas. I apologize if I mispronunciated any of those names. Now, the big question with regard to the A's and figuring out their roster is catcher. Okay? With 2 spots, who are most likely to get the spots? I think without a doubt, one of those spots is Colby Thomas, unless he just has an awful spring. The other spots depend on a couple things. I just talked about the hardest part in figuring out the A's 40-man roster right now is catcher. Can Tyler Soderstrom play catcher when he isn't playing first base? If he can, this would send McCann down, and if Nick Kurtz has a big spring, I can see him being put on the 40-man roster and possibly making the opening day roster. Those are 2 huge ifs, because McCann wasn't bad last year when he was in there. It's actually three big ifs. One, Soderstrom has to prove he can play catcher. And will he even get the opportunity to do so? Two, Kyle McCann has to have just a dead awful spring. And three, Nick Kurtz has to prove he is big league ready now by having a ginormous spring training. All three happen. Yes, I think Kurtz will get that last spot. Again, I have Colby Thomas to get one of the two spots no matter what, unless something out of the ordinary does happen. If those three things don't happen, I can see the last spot being Max Muncy's for the taking. We are shaky in the infield. We have all the potential in the world, but we are not proven. We have a proven veteran at third in Urshela, but that's it. Wilson was okay when he was up last year. Geloff may have had the most disappointing year out of all the A's last year, and Soderstrom was out for 2 months in July and August. When he was up, he did show flashes of greatness. I compared him earlier this year to Christian Yelich in his approach at the plate. Listen, these prospects are unreal prospects, and much of the optimism on the A's is based on these youngsters' success. Muncy has to take it, though. He was hurt last year, missed fall ball in Arizona. A lot of hype. I like him a lot, but same deal as Kurtz. He has to have a big spring. The other guy to look for, if it's not Kurtz or Muncy, is a starting pitcher. Right now, your rotation is Luis Severino, Jeffrey Springs, and JP Sears. That are for sure, right? I like Bedot, and I think Estes will get that fifth spot over Mitch Spence. But if any of them falter, the guy that I can see coming up and being an absolute beast, maybe my favorite prospect out of anybody on that 20-man list outside of Nick Kurtz, is Jack Perkins. Jack Perkins is an absolute beast. Look for him to have a big spring. I'm high on Jack Perkins. Reminds me of a young Kurt Schilling. Just simply a competitor on the mound. Great stuff. High velocity. Just a big-time pitcher. Love Jack Perkins. There is a lot of competition for the last remaining spots on the 26-man roster and the 40-man roster, which brings me to the biggest battles to look for going into spring training. Up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by SelectQuote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowls, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they have helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/locked on. Go to selectquote.com/locked Locked On today to get started. That's selectquote.com/locked on. They shop, you save. So we are officially still considered off season, which means episodes will run 3 days a week. I don't know what days those will be. It depends on news that hit the wire on the A's. But yes, it's 3 days a week, and episodes should be up at 6 a.m. during the week. I'm shooting for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. I have a big time guest tomorrow. I guarantee you are going to love tomorrow's episode. He's a former athletic. I'll leave it at that. Starting the week of February 10, we will be back to 5 days a week. February 10, which happens to be exactly when pitchers and catchers do report. Let's look at what I foresee the biggest competition or battles on the current 40-man roster are. Let's start with position players. Shea Langoliers, Tyler Soderstrom, Zach Geloff, Jacob Wilson, Gio Urshela, Miguel Andujar, JJ Bleday, Lawrence Butler, Brett Rooker, Seth Brown, Estuary Ruiz, Kyle McCann are all in, which leaves 2 spots open. Let's first take a look at our outfield. Miguel Andujar, JJ Bleday, and Lawrence Butler with Estuary Ruiz coming off the bench. Seth Brown can play a little bit of outfield. Brett Rooker, we have been told, will be playing a little bit of outfield as well. Offensively, we have speed. We have power. We can hit it. We can score. Without a doubt, we're great. But we are shaky as can be defensively. Andujar and Butler do have strong arms, both in left and in right. But every fly ball that gets hit to them, I'm shaking in my boots. We don't really know what we're getting right now with Rooker, and Seth Brown with the rest of the positions he does play is going to make all the plays he is supposed to, but nothing much past that. With that being said, none of them really track anything down out of the norm. Bleday's okay. He's not bad, but far from great. They make the plays they're supposed to, but again, shaky as can be. The guy that is the X factor who could absolutely go out and get it and cover space in the outfield is Denzel Clarke. The question is his bat. If he can show he can swing it, he'll make the 26-man roster. No question. If that happens, here's the competition. You have CJ Alexander, who I'm real excited about. Brett Harris, Daryl Hernandez, and Max Schumann for 1 spot. Max Schumann would be your 1 and 2 options there just because of their ability to play both shortstop and third base at a fairly high level. I'm interested in Brett Harris. I'm interested to see if he got better in the offseason. He is our best defensive player, period, in our whole organization. I've called him a young Matt Chapman before. As I said just a second ago, I'm interested in CJ Alexander. Big left-handed bat, a lot of pop. If Denzel has a bad spring, it will be Schumann, Hernandez, Alexander, and Brett Harris. Out of those 4, 2 spots. And again, if Clarke can show he can swing the bat, only one of those 4 will get to be on the 26-man roster. Pitching. I've covered this before. I'm not changing. Severino, Spring, Sears, Bideau, Estes, Miller, Leclerc, Otanez, McFarland, Hogan Harris, Mitch Spence, Noah Murdoch, Tyler Ferguson in one spot between Ryan Cusick, JT Ginn, Gunnar Hoglund, Grant Holman, Anthony Maldonado, Jacob Lopez, Justin Sterner, and Brady Basso. We have it just about all covered. Let me break down every position, and I will tell you who I think makes not only the 40-man, but the 26-man roster up next. This episode is brought to you in part by GameTime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, GameTime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, GameTime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming Golden State Warriors game using the GameTime app. With GameTime Picks, I found amazing deals and I could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time! Okay, let's break it down. Position by position. Catcher. Obviously, your catcher number one is going to be Shea Langoliers. McCann was good last year. I got McCann staying in the same role, backing up Langoliers. He's a good left-handed bat. He had some big hits last year. He's a good catcher. He's a good, solid backup catcher. Zach Geloff is going to be your second baseman. Got to have a big year from him. Jacob Wilson, your shortstop. Gio Urshela is going to be your starting third baseman. The big question is Denzel Clarke going to make the squad? I have him as a no. And the reason I have him as a no is because right now, again, Andujar, Bleday, Butler, Seth Brown can play outfield. Rooker is supposed to play some outfield. Let's not forget about Esty. Are we shaky a little bit defensively? Maybe, but that can definitely change. I just don't see it as Denzel's time. And I think we need a lot more work in that infield. Speaking of the infield, what do I see happening? I like out of Hernandez, Schumann, CJ Alexander, and Brett Harris. I like those two spots to go to Max Schumann and CJ Alexander. I like Alexander's bat. Big, left-handed power hitter. It's exactly what the A's need. I see him making a difference. And I think when it's all said and done, I see him platooning with Urshela at third. Pitching. Severino, Spring, Sears, Bedeau, and Estes is going to be your rotation. We just covered the bullpen on Monday. I'm not going to get into that again. And I have Brady Basso getting that last spot. Now, with regard to the 40-man roster, who do those two spots go to? With Medina and Waldachuk going on the 60-day IL, who do I think gets the last two spots? I'll tell you who. Colby Thomas is a lock to get one of the two spots. I don't see him making the 26-man roster immediately, but he is going to get one of the last two spots. And the last spot, God, I'm sure glad I'm not Mark Kotze. This is a tough one. Jeez. You got to go Kurtz. You got to go Nick Kurtz. That's for sure. I think Kurtz gets that last spot on the 40-man. He has a good enough spring. He's our most exciting prospect. He's one of baseball's best prospects. He had a big fall league when he was playing last year. He definitely produced. So, yeah, that wraps up my 40-man roster. Who do you guys like? What did I miss? What do you think is going to be the biggest competition with regard to spring training? The rules of the MLB rosters makes it a little bit harder. It's not that easy. So, in other words, in order for someone to come off that 40-man, like I said, DFA'd, 60-day IL, trade, or flat out released. What I do know, it's going to be an exciting spring training. It's an exciting roster. It's a young roster. It's filled with prospects. It's filled with some veterans. We got a little bit of everything. I'm excited about spring training. I mean, Jack Perkins I talked about briefly. I mean, I didn't mention top prospect Mason Barnett. How about Daniel Susac? Max Muncy. I didn't talk about Henry Bolte. We got a lot of great players, a lot of young prospects. We'll see what happens, guys. February 10, catchers and pitchers report. Couldn't be more thrilled. Again, comment. Tell me who I'm missing. Who do you guys like? Thank you for making Locked On A's your first listen today. For your second listen, I'm Locked On MLB baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast.